Welcome back to Old Guy REI. Today, we have the chance to speak with a really special friend and fellow investor. You out there in TV land probably know him as the Wealth Building Journey. We also know him as Chester Williams, and we're super excited because today is Friday. Uh, don't know the date, but
August 30.
August 30th. And Chester just finished signing his closing documents and is officially a landlord. So
Yes.
we're here to congratulate him, and hopefully everybody out there will send him some congratulations as well. But it hasn't been easy, right, Chester? I think we kind of came across you either in Dion's or Matt's chats. And I want to say it's almost 2 years.
Yeah,
And
it's
yeah, is
oh
that correct?
yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. Like I think uh someone I can't remember who it was that had mentioned it, but Dion has actually been doing this since 2021. So it might even be 3 years. So I know it's definitely been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you've been involved that long. I think Cynthia and I jumped in and found him a little bit later, but still it's been quite a while. And so we'll go back to it, but what did you close on? What did you buy?
Yeah, so it is a single family property that is in Detroit, Michigan. The uh property when I worked with the turnkey provider, he proposed an option to me to basically convert one of uh, the closet area basically into a fourth bedroom. So, of course, that's going to help with the rent. And I was looking at it and thinking about it, did a couple of made a couple of phone calls and of course, kind of consulted with you and a couple of other people. And so I decided, okay, that would make sense. So since it's already under contract and it was going to add a little bit more to the closing costs and down payment, but I was like, on the back end, it'll eventually pay for it. So it's a four bedroom, one bath, and like I said, it's in Detroit, Michigan.
Great. And what was your, um, you mentioned turnkey provider, and today a lot of people don't think turnkeys can work because they say you're paying over retail, and which is not really true. There's not a lot of room to add value, but you did add some value through the process with that extra bedroom. And so we'll check out the numbers in a little bit, but you didn't start looking for a single family in Detroit. When we met you, you were looking in your market. Maybe you could tell us what you were looking for back then and what maybe why that didn't work.
Yeah, definitely. So my home area, which is also the investing market, is in the Washington, D.C. Metro area. And like a little bit of quick background on it. The It's called a nickname that we give it is called the DMV for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so I live in the Maryland suburbs or on the Maryland suburbs side of the DMV. And within the market that I specifically have been looking in and investing in at the time relative to the rest of the DMV, it was somewhat affordable in the property classes that I was looking at. And, as you mentioned, and we'll touch on the different property classes and how that kind of progressed over time. But I had originally started by looking at three bedroom, two bath houses and uh, essentially kind of expanded the search from the immediate area, which is, let's say, like about 10, 15 minutes, which for comparison, the particular county overall has close to 1 million people. So 10 to 15 minutes in one direction is somewhere around, 250, 300,000 people. So that initially had not really yielded the types of yield or cash on cash returns that I was looking for. So that prompted me to start looking at other asset classes.
Yeah, and then also going back, I think when we were in Dion's lives and things, and you were talking about doing rent by the room. Was that always your goal, or were you looking at just single families for long-term rentals before?
So that actually is an excellent point. I had one one of Dion's, I forget what you call the little 20-sided die thing, and basically it was I think it was 30-minute call with both Dion and Matt. And so they basically, uh, for lack of a better phrase, were very transparent with me in terms of, what things am I doing to actually get myself closer to actually closing on a property. And so this was maybe a year and a half ago at this point. And I told them, again, I was looking at properties in the market and not really finding anything. And that is when, I believe it was Matt who initially had said, hey, start thinking about different asset classes because based on how you look at the property or the asset class as an approach, it could go from being an alligator if it's, renting out the whole property versus possibly getting a little bit of cash flow by changing the strategy to rent by the room as one example. And specifically, that was the conversation which prompted me to then start considering the market that's near the University of Maryland in College Park, and more specifically within about 5 to 10 miles or so, mainly for things like walking, biking, maybe some small commutes, also considering things like bus routes, uh, simply as a way for convenient and easy access to University of Maryland, uh, as an alternative to simply looking at a, single property as just one, whereby the rent by the room strategy, I'd be employing that for different students. So like for this particular county, which is it's called Prince George's County, where University of Maryland is, the ordinance, that might not be the right word, but basically the ordinance or the regulation is there's no more than five unrelated persons within the same property. So I could, and was the strategy that I was looking at were 5 bedroom houses, ideally with as many bathrooms as possible, to try to see about going about that approach. The only problem is within, I don't know, I want to say like, you know, 2, 3 mile radius, which is again that, 5 to 10 minute walking and biking and bus route radius of the campus. The properties relative to the rest of the area were like almost 3x. And while the rents were such that they could justify it, it was difficult looking at uh, some of the covenants that were in place on certain properties. And while it was definitely beneficial to get the advice from Matt, I had to make an adjustment, and that might be something that I do come back to now that I've gone through Matt's course in terms of essentially self-managing as a landlord.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
I know you really dug into the analyzation. I think once you transitioned and you were looking at homes for rent by the room strategy, you were at that for about a year as well. What what made you switch and think Detroit and think turnkey?
yeah, so definitely a complete 180 is not really the best phrase, but it's so far from, quote unquote, night and day because, Detroit is, let's call ballpark about 1,000 miles away from DC. And, without knowing anybody there, first question is probably going to be, how in the world would you literally go from one market where you live, and of course, since I've, lived here for, many, many years, know the area well, to literally being on a investor property tour one time over a weekend, come back with, a suite or an array or option of properties to choose from, pick one, and then be under contract and get to the point where you're closing.
Yeah,
So to start,
that was
so
a wild weekend.
yeah, to kind of start at the beginning of that portion of it, um, I will freely admit part of it was frustration because I was running into problems with not only, and this actually was not the first property that I was about to close on. I was actually already under contract with a property that was here in the area, which was not actually too far from the University of Maryland. It turns out that that property had so many problems and so many violations that, interestingly enough, the neighbor who was living next door was actually one of the town council people, and she was very vocal about wanting to see the existing homeowners, change hands because they were not the nicest of neighbors, let's say. Um, but the frustration that had started that journey to start looking outside, I would say probably started with that property. And really the culmination of it was there was an addition on the back of the house that, coupled with everything else that was in the home inspection report, would have, with conservative estimates, put the repairs necessary to simply bring it up to standard, simply up to standard, somewhere in the neighborhood of between 75 and $100,000. And that was not including any fines that the town and the county would have levied for the illegal structure. And I believe it would have been somewhere between, it was either 150 or $175 per day once um, whether it's the town or the county, regardless of whether, one or the other or both of them got wind of the fact that there was an illegal structure on the back of the house. Now, of course, the current homeowners had not said anything because I don't even think that they would have allowed a sale to go through or to consummate. But it was the experience from that where, in dealing with the agent who brought that house to me, it was ironic because one of my next door neighbors, when she actually was like, "Hey, I'd like to actually come and take a look at this with you because this is going to be the first time you're looking at a property." And so I was like, "Sure, definitely," because she has something like 15 properties already, so she already knows what she's looking for. Um, and so yeah, it was like a complete, you know, hurricane times tsunami times, earthquake of just complete disaster throughout the property. Um, so the long story short, all of that was like, okay, great, dodged a bullet, didn't go to closing. We run around the corner, literally around the corner, there was a property that was in much better shape, exact same bed and bath count, 5 bed, 2 bath, looked pristine from the outside. And when I pulled it up on, I think it was Redfin that I pulled it up on, immaculate. Here's the kicker. That property, although it was already under contract, no, I should say it was under contract after I had already gone under contract with the house that I had experienced all the problems with. But initially, when the agent had shown me the property, the one that was around the corner, that one was not under contract. So there was that frustration. But comparatively speaking, it was like, you know, looking inside of a king's palace, so to speak, as compared to the property that she had brought me, where it looked like a dungeon. And the property that was around the corner was, I believe it was $35,000 cheaper than the one that had all the headaches and problems.
Oh, wow.
So
That's a big
I was,
difference.
yeah, yeah. And so I, of course, doing a little bit of negotiation, had initially offered and immediately got accepted, which again was a little bit kind of like, okay, that's interesting that they didn't even bother to counter. But I had offered $35,000 off, and all of the comparables that the agent brought me were all showing, 385, 390, and I was basically getting pressured into, hey, I think this is a good deal. I think you need to go for this. So it was the combination of the agent not really advocating for me as much as they were advocating for themselves, plus, and she kind of let this one slip. She does this part time, so that also let me know this was more of a side hustle basically for her. So I won't hold that against her, but at the same time, definitely got that vibe of like, okay, don't really feel like the I feel like I'm just, a cog in the wheel, just a part of the transaction. So
Yeah.
that was the ultimate reason why I got frustrated. And I think I probably would still be looking in the market had I not had that bad experience. But that was the initial kickoff point.
Mm.
So what I decided to do was took a little bit of time off for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then comes the ORAT 50K celebration. Something about the atmosphere and the environment had invigorated me so much. And this is, of course, the first time that you and I and Cynthia and Mark and Mikey, like all of us had all met in person. We went around Vegas, checked out the Ryan Pineda event that Friday before, and then we had Zubers all day Saturday and Sunday event. So it was there that in meeting with different people, one of the first people who had helped me to start to expand and think about, you have the skill of understanding what a buy box looks like, which you have permission to look at and which you have permission to exclude from the buy box, basically. So you can now take that skill and, now you can look at it anywhere. It makes sense.
Hmm.
So that's what initially started me thinking that is what is the most important thing is to be able to understand, you know, the difference between a good deal and a bad deal. So I initially was looking at Columbus, Ohio, and I was talking with Basilio Alcantara, who is also an investor, who's, again, part of Zuber's, Dion and Matt's groups. And he was telling me, and actually he and Lars Nielsen, they both independently were telling me that based on different types of research, Columbus is a really good market to start checking out because there's going to be a lot of industrial and a lot of residential and various military related, think of like Boeing and who are some of the other big defense contractors. Boeing is the biggest, Raytheon and and a few others. They're going to have um, air and aerospace related contracts coming to nearby Air Force bases. So you're talking about all in all between Ohio State University, so another market where potential rent by the room is possible. Again, as far as workforce, a varied and diverse community between Columbus and Dayton and a few other areas where you can get to within about an hour. And uh, the market as a whole was relatively affordable. So I had started doing a little bit of my own research and started seeing, okay, yeah, what these guys are saying makes a lot of sense. So I started digging a little bit deeper. Um, but as I was doing that, the I think it was you and I who had a conversation one day about a turnkey uh, property that you were about to close on, and I had asked a little bit more about it. And so I was just kind of like, okay, never really heard about the turnkey model before, you know, definitely intrigued. As a matter of fact, I think that was the day of the eclipse when we had started to discuss and kind of get the layout of, here's what a turnkey is, why the turnkey model may be different from what people used to think it was. And based on some of the returns, definitely, again, still have to do your due diligence. This isn't simply, just go pick a property and, cash flows just coming in. But, it's definitely a strategy type to consider. And again, mostly these are going to be buy and holds. These aren't going to be, like wholesale or fix and flip or anything like that. But out of that conversation is when I then got in touch with the turnkey. Um, I don't know how to describe her
Yeah,
platform, but basically she was the her platform is the one where we basically went and started looking at some of the properties, and then she, after scheduling a call with her, she then kind of explained, here is why this is a little bit different than what a traditional turnkey may look like.
yeah. I think yeah, we've talked about Allie Boone. She's been on the channel before. She's super awesome. I've known her since 2019. Never met her in person, but she was on with us a few weeks ago, and she's the one who flies out and checks all these operations out, different turnkey providers. And in Detroit, Al is the guy that you were working with. But that's why, Dion teases us sometimes because we're in a bunch of different markets, but we were working with Allie and we were following the turnkey deals that we thought would work for us. So we ended up in 4 different states or something like that. And she's always had our back. If we ever didn't understand anything or the process, um, she was always there to help us. So I'm glad you were able to get together with her. And then, like you said, the investor trip. I think all the properties were bought up on that trip. There was nothing left after you guys got through with it.
Yeah, everything. I think I took a look this morning. Everything's either under contract or sold. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
it was all the inventory was gone. It was insane.
yeah, that's great. A lot of times we talk about, and we're sharing our journey, like on this channel, everything we're going through with our properties and lessons and things. But even though it was a turnkey, you had some stumbling blocks as well. I know everybody thinks, a turnkey is supposed to be all rehabbed and everything's perfect, and maybe you don't even need an inspection or things like that. But we always, and you found out you can do your own inspection, even though the turnkey provider has done theirs. There were things on your inspection that you found that hadn't been done yet, right?
Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah. So we'll fast forward a little bit. So like you mentioned, after connecting with Allie, I went to Detroit, I believe it was right at the end of May, beginning of June for the investor uh, tour, we'll call it. And so we went and looked at a few properties, some in basically what you call three stages of like recently bought properties where it's like, the well-worn, very well lived in progress properties where they have the contractors. And we actually got a chance to talk to a few of them while they were doing things like, priming, painting, sanding, installing cabinets, so on and so forth, and then finished properties. And so I mean, it literally looked like night and day. And from the appearances perspective, like you'd mentioned, they look pristine. They look brand new if you didn't know any better. And so after the trip, we all had an option to basically I think there was like something like a dozen, maybe 15 different properties that were going to be for sale. So we had an option to say, okay, here are the different properties. Let us know which ones that, uh, of course, do your own due diligence and everything like that, but get back to us. And then we will, based on who has or has not selected various properties, let you know whether it's still available. Because again, it's going to be first come, first serve. So the property that I was looking at, I was like, okay, this one where it was basically sort of um, the beginning stage, let's call it. That was the one where I was like, I can see, potential for expansion and possibly, and it was, I think it was because we had mentioned it on the trip, there was the possibility of expanding and adding a fourth bedroom that uh, I was like, okay, if you can add another bedroom and based on the proximity of, I believe it was like near a hospital and like a few other like high-end amenities that, like we're say a few blocks away, not like immediately near it, but in a decent enough neighborhood. So that was the property that I said, okay, and looking at the numbers, especially because we have the possibility of being able to increase rents by going from a three-bedroom to a four-bedroom. I'd like to uh, basically put my bid in for that particular property. So that was the one that I was basically my first choice. And after talking, I think Al and Allie had discussed, and then Allie, or excuse me, Al let me know that, hey, congrats, no one else has selected this one. So we're going to offer this one to you to go under contract with.
Yeah.
So from there, like you'd mentioned, of course they did the renovations process, let's call it, just literally top to bottom, got all of the progress photos of, seeing the before, the during, and then the after. And like I said, looked pristine, spotless, immaculate. And it was at that point, right as we were ready to initiate all of the formal steps of the closing procedure, that we went into basically the due diligence phase. That in remembering both, and I think Zuber might have also said it. So I'll say all three of Zuber, Dion, and Matt all said, no matter what, do your own due diligence on every single property. That means it doesn't matter, you know, if it's, you know, hundreds of years old, like some of the properties Matt likes to invest in, or a turnkey. Get a property inspection report. Um, this one, I believe, actually, no. I had to get a sewer scope report independently, but there are some that allow for that combination. So even though this one didn't, that's fine. Um, but those are the main things is the various reports, as well as, of course, the appraisal. And then we'll, of course, get to that one in a second.
Mhm.
But the uh, property inspection report came back with half a dozen major items and then a few minor items. So, and again, I would not have been able to know any better. So had I simply taken Al's word for it, and it's not as though I believed he was attempting to um like do anything dirty or underhanded. I think he simply was, of course, wanting to, continue in the just continue the process, getting everything completed so that the property can close.
Mhm.
So, with the initial um, closing date set for August 30th, we were thinking that we might have been able to push it up a little bit, but of course, that was going to be contingent on things like being able to get a loan, and of course, the appraisal. So, again, all the basic due diligence steps. All of that is to say, had I not done or had I not gotten the property inspection report, there were things that I would not have even known to look for that could have been violations, basically, that could have prevented the property from being, well, I mean, of course, would have had to have come out of pocket to do so, but the um, couple $100 that I spent on the inspection saved what could have been thousands of dollars in additional repairs. And again, mind you, this is a turnkey. So, like I said, I don't think that they were cutting corners. I think it was simply they have a schedule to keep and probably largely got everything done and maybe had multiple different properties to work on that day or whatever the case may be. But long story short, I still had to be the one responsible for doing that due diligence on my part because again, once I sign my name on all of the documents, it's now my responsibility.
Yeah, and it was really awesome. I was kind of with you through that part, and we talked about your inspection report and everything. And it was great that Al and his team remedied all those things on the report. So then, you think you're all set to go and close, and then you get an appraisal.
Yeah, so it's if it wasn't one thing, it was another. So one thing I will say broadly, really quickly, or from a generic standpoint, anybody who is looking to uh get into real estate, and then when I say that, I mean specifically investing, whether it be short term, midterm rentals, long term buy and hold, like with what Frank and I are both doing. The one thing that I would strongly encourage are the following two things. I should say two things. Patience and adaptability. You will go very, very far with being patient with a process, even with deadlines, and then also thinking about possible alternatives and alternative options is what I was going to say initially, but possible alternatives that will still get you to the end goal. Why say that? Coming back to the appraisal, after everything had been fixed with the uh, from the home inspection, the appraisal came in $9,000 below the initial value, or I should say the value came in $9,000 below the agreed upon purchase price. So instead of, panicking, doing things like that, when I talked with the lender, which is Neighborhood Loans, and Brian Bielstein, Brian had simply said, you know, this isn't necessarily the end of the world. It simply means that there are different options where you'll have to look at, which include one, which is an ROV, and the acronym stands for reconsideration of value. The second is simply come to the closing table with the difference, meaning so that entire $9,000 difference, I would have simply had to have made that up at closing, or work with Al to quote unquote meet in the middle, basically. And so some different options for that would look like a $4,500 credit on his behalf, meaning lowers the price by $4,500. But then I would also have to bring $4,500 to the closing table. So those are a few different options. And what we decided to do was basically sort of work in order to be able to say, okay, let's exhaust all of our options to see. Uh, and one of the things that Brian actually did as well that I do appreciate was he level set with me. A reconsideration of value is probably the most straightforward way to see about the possibility of getting the value updated, but it doesn't happen often. It usually happens 2 to 3 out of 10 times when it does. So don't get my basically he was saying don't get my hopes up, but again, hope for the best, prepare for other options, basically. Um, so I was like, okay, makes sense. So when the value ultimately did come back, uh, $1,000 above the purchase or the contract price, basically, it was a relief. And it was mainly because I believe a lot of the other properties in the area, the comparables or comps that Al had submitted and provided over to Brian, the appraiser looked at those and said, okay, yeah, we'll definitely take these into consideration because I believe a lot of them were right about $1,000 or $2,000 above or below the purchase price. So that helped to provide a more accurate ballpark for the appraiser to say, okay, maybe then these, after looking at these comparable properties, and I believe it was also the window as well. It's either 3 or 6 months as far as when they've sold. So the totality of the information in those comparables helped persuade the, I almost said adjuster or auditor, the appraiser to say, okay, yeah, so this property actually should be worth a little bit more. And so they bumped it up by 10K. So definitely was a positive. And in, further continuing with that, even though this was, right at, closing and everything, I did not actually get the final closing disclosure until after my particular bank. Um, they actually have an office where up to a certain wire amount, you can initiate that amount or less all day. But because this amount for the uh, down payment and closing costs was way over that amount, I had to actually call the office, give all of the information, and like physically read everything to one of the representatives. So had to do a little bit of an adjustment there, but ultimately once the wire initiated and then cleared, the the title agent, I had to get in touch with her to let her know, hey, here's confirmation from my bank that the wire is en route to their bank. So uh, all in all, really was a process of really patience and adaptability, like, pretty much every step of the way, because otherwise I may still be looking for my first property.
Yeah, I know. We were talking the other day, and a few of us in the group, and even Brian, I talk to Brian a few times a week, but we were saying that the deal must have been meant to be because everything that you went through just it worked out, right? The reevaluation for the appraisal is, like you said, something you don't hear about happening a lot. So for them to come back and actually give you a better appraisal was awesome. And then we were saying all these things that you went through. We talk about all the learning that happens after you get your first property, right? That's when the education starts. But like you already have like 90% of the education down before you got the house. So we're
Yeah.
super, everybody I'm sure is going to be super happy to hear that you did get to close. They've been anticipating it for weeks and months, even years. But but yeah, we're super happy for you. And again, looking at that inspection report, it's a nice little house, um, in a decent area, right? Because we were on with who was that had the software on our show a while back, and you told them about the
Oh,
area that you were in, and they were saying what a nice area that was to invest in too.
yeah. I believe it's the way I remember, because his name is very similar to those who remember the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, is Donatello, and I think it's Donato. I
Donato,
believe that's how he spells it. It's
yeah,
Donato. I think
with Bright
either
Investor, right?
Callahan or O'Callahan. Yeah, and yeah, so he in another it's like basically he and somebody else are, I think, either co-founders or co-CEOs of Bright Investor. And yeah, and the power of that tool, very similar to Ariel Herrera and Coffee Closers and like a few others like PropStream and PropWire in
Mm,
terms of the power or the capability of overlaying various um, search criteria. So it's not simply like a Redfin or a Zillow where it's simply, you know, I want to see these types of houses in this area. It also overlays like, what does the crime look like? What about various amenities? Like, we sometimes joke about the 7-Eleven rule or the
mhm.
Lululemon rule, things like that.
Yeah.
So those are different things where they've overlaid all of the different types of data so it can then show, hey, are there more renters than buyers in this area? Is the population growing? Is it flat? Is it shrinking? So all of the different major metrics that investors would want to look at. And yeah, it literally, like you said, hit every single metric from the Bright Investor platform. So
Yeah, yeah,
definitely was very cool.
that was cool. So you earlier we were talking and we were talking about next steps, and I know I've heard good things about the property manager that's working with Al in Detroit, and those are some of your next steps to see how they work and what their systems are and things like that, getting used to that part of it. What as far as numbers, I don't know if you're okay sharing just some general numbers like what you bought the property for, what it's going to rent now that you added a bedroom, and maybe a rough idea of the yield you're going to get after you exclude all the expenses for the month.
Yeah, so I actually have a little bit of a slightly different approach in terms of the expenses. And I know after when you and I had initially discussed, um, i- not trying to dodge the question, it's only because I don't have the updated numbers for 4-bedroom properties. I have it for 3-bedroom.
Mm.
Have a general sense, but I'm gonna have to talk more in depth with the property manager. And this is, again, part of that onboarding process, if you will, of, one, getting to know the processes, how well they are familiar with not only um, broader perspective, Michigan as a state, but then going down to Wayne County and then Detroit City laws, rules, ordinances, and regulations. But then also, what are their processes, excuse me, for things like onboarding a tenant, um, maintaining, ensuring compliance for the tenant to uh, comply with all of the, Michigan all the way down to Detroit uh, regulations when it comes to landlord tenant interactions. So there's, definitely that level of homework that kind of starts after the closing, which and I'll be honest with you, Al is definitely very sharp and on the ball. And as soon as the closing completed, he had already put me in contact with. Now, again, admittedly, we'd already talked with the uh, both the um, turnkey I believe it's called Strategy Properties, with Strategy Properties and with um, Real Property Management, the Detroit property management investor. So they were actually both there on the trip with Ali, and this is where we, again, spent the entire weekend up in Detroit, seeing, all of the various properties, how close it was to, things like the it being a veteran, seeing it, I want to say it was like a few blocks, maybe like 3, 4 blocks, maybe a little bit less from the VA hospital that was up in Detroit. In it very vibrant city. But back ultimately to the point about uh the various processes. Uh the the rent for a 4 bedroom can go anywhere between on the low end, from what I've seen, 1,500. On the high end, I have seen 1,900. There are some, now these are also area dependent, but there's some areas that are like what you'd call like A markets. Like if you think, I don't know if you've seen the movie Gross Point Blank. Now, admittedly, I have not seen the movie Gross Point Blank. This was only just some of the trivia that Al had actually provided while we were on the tour. We actually went through the area where there was Gross Point Woods, and Gross Point Shores. That is A plus. Those are A plus neighborhoods. So the areas where all of the properties that we were investing, you'd say maybe a few blocks away. So we basically call it like a B minus type of area. So, you're
Mhm.
not paying A plus type prices for properties.
Right.
So that's why it can vary between, 14, 1,500 on the very low end to like 19, sometimes even 2,000 or even 2,500, especially if you're in those A plus areas like Grosse Point.
Mhm.
So that's why I said I don't have a definitive number yet, because I was really more anchored and fixed on the 3 bedroom numbers, which that one I could definitely give you is, 1,300 is a solid um and this is pretty much almost not universal, but like again, it'll of course depend on what types of neighborhoods, but mostly for your B and your C type neighborhoods, you're looking right around 1215, or excuse me, 1250 to 1350. So that's why I said, because this was like a B minus area, 1,300 would have been a decent rent for a 3-1. But that's where I'm going to then have the discussion with the property manager on what would be reasonable and what they've seen renting for a 4 bed, 1 bath between that 14 to 1,900 range. My guess, let's say if we were to use a, quote unquote, split the difference, or, just straight down the middle, believe that would be 1,650 for, let's, if that was, just the average number. So we can use that. And I do actually have up the spreadsheet. So even though I'll be looking off to my left at the spreadsheet, um, oh no, actually it's on my main screen here. So if I was to put in 1,650, what that would look like with the current principal and interest, property taxes, and insurance. And I can also add in the expenses to see what it would look like uh, with withholding the let's call it the rainy day expenses, your repairs, maintenance, vacancy, and then of course I'm going to also include CapEx. Even though it's a brand new property, it's still, in my opinion, prudent because eventually it's going to get to the point where the uh, appliances are going to wear out. Well, I won't actually have to worry about appliances, but things like it will eventually need a new roof, it'll eventually need a new HVAC, and so on and so forth. So that'll all fold into CapEx. So the uh, without the reserves, let's call it, right now that is looking at a 8.5% cash on cash ROI, and I'll have to do a little bit of finagling. So I'm gonna actually move this over here. So I'll be looking off to, I think it might be my left, to add that in to see what that would look like. Um, Give me one quick second to add this in. Okay, so if I was to add that in, that would bring that, so it'll bring it down a little bit. It would bring it down to uh not quite cut in half, but it's right around a 4.9 percent cash on cash. If I was to withhold the repairs, maintenance, vacancy, and CapEx each month, what I'm doing a little bit differently is I am deciding, and again, this is really kind of a different approach, and this is one of the things that you and I had also spoken about. The approach that I'm choosing to take is setting aside a year's worth of expenses for up to four properties. What that's going to come out to is right around 15,000 all told. And again, it'll be based, specifically on this one property right now, but the thought process behind that is I'm not going to have to then withhold those reserves. I can simply pull from those reserves as necessary and then simply replenish that from the cash flow as I need to. So what that allows me to do, I have more cash, more cash flow that's coming in every month so that it will allow me to build up the reserve, or not really the reserves, but build up the next down payment for the next property faster.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've had a lot of conversations about that. And if you go into buying and you have a big stack of cash in a reserve account, then all of the cash flow could be stacked up, like you said, for the next purchase. And then if you need any of the reserves, then you stop for a bit and replenish the reserves and keep going. So that's all really cool. Um, so we can revisit that after you talk to the PMs, and maybe you can come back another time after you figure out your true numbers. Not that that's too critical, but it's just interesting to know. And like we're doing now, we have three properties that we need to fill in St. Louis, and we're wondering where the rents are going to fall to. We're trying to stay involved in that process. And then we'll be sharing the numbers because there have been a few other people interested in some of the markets that we are investing in. I don't want to give anybody any false information, or I want to give them the true numbers. That way they can make a better decision for themselves if they want to venture into a new market. But yeah, I think the main thing is you're closed, and that is going to
Yeah.
be the start of a great journey. And like I said before, everybody in our group has been cheering you on all this time. So they're going to be super stoked to hear that you finally closed. And then and see, I I think I recall. Did you say you had a Facebook, not a Facebook, but a YouTube channel at some point?
So I do have a YouTube channel. I have not started posting on there yet. It'll probably be and so interestingly, Derek, the ADU guy,
Mhm.
had actually been one of the ones who was like, "Hey, just get started." There has just been like just no level, like it has been, I don't want to call it excuses, but like there have been a lot of things uh that have taken place, and it uh has been difficult, not necessarily impossible. But you know, using the approach that he had mentioned, one of the things that honestly helped me get to this point in terms of closing was it was really kind of two things. Number one, the renewed ambition or enthusiasm from the 50K ORAT celebration. And oh, by the way, we've got to also have a celebration for Matt because he's, I think, within the past week or so, just hit 10,000 subscribers. So we're definitely going to have a celebration for him. Um, Maybe it could be a joint celebration in Vegas.
Yeah, there you go.
Come February. So that would
Yeah,
actually be cool.
I understand. I understand now myself how much time it takes to just try to be consistent, getting videos out there and information. Um, but whenever you can, if you ever decide to, that kind of stuff is valuable, I think, for all of us beginners to share and take in from the other beginning investors. So, uh, but yeah, it does take quite a bit of time. I'm lucky I work for myself. Sometimes I can just blow off work and go make a video, but not too often. Um, so I appreciate you coming on with me. And one of the things we were messing around with earlier, and that I've done with other guests, was to ask them if they enjoy music and what kind of music they listen to. And I think you
Uh,
mentioned something different. What are you into?
yeah. So, interestingly enough, listen to I have and I would strongly recommend for everybody YouTube Premium. It's literally worth its weight in gold. It will, like, for me, I was a skeptic at first, but when I had gone, I think, like 2 weeks without ever seeing an ad, and somebody had brought up something about I hate all these ads, it literally clicked for me right then and there that this like pays for itself. So I was like, okay. One of the bonuses or benefits, I believe you also get access to YouTube Music Premium free as well.
Okay.
So um one of the things that I have been doing is yeah, outside of just regular work, is I have basically chess as a hobby, and then I also listen to jazz music. Mainly because it's very relaxing to me, honestly. So I honestly could just, just sit back and just listen to jazz music just all day. I mean, you know, definitely something I very much appreciate, especially after dealing with numbers and spreadsheets and people who don't understand numbers or spreadsheets all day. It's fun to be, if you know anybody who's ever worked in a corporate finance setting, um, you're always dealing with executives and senior executives who basically know nothing about finance, and they are responsible for, multi-million dollar and billion-dollar budgets. And
Hmm.
so it's basically, your responsibility to help them understand the things that they need to know. And sometimes it can be quite an adventure. So that's
I'm
why I
sure.
enjoy jazz.
Yeah, I'm sure. Are there any particular artists that are on the top of your mind?
Um, that's interesting because I have listened to so much. I just literally just cut on YouTube Music, just tell it, hey, just do, whatever jazz, and then just it'll pick something, and then it will just rotate between different artists. So I don't have one that's like right off the top of my head. Maybe
Yeah.
that's something I can for the next time that we talk, I'll have, get a couple of artists. I think one of them might be Kenny Chesney. I think that's one. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Kenny Chesney is one of them. But, so
Yeah. You might be thinking Kenny G, but
Kenny G, thank you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Kenny Chesney's country. And like I've said on here before, I just love music. It just like you said, it really can change your mood instantly
Oh
from
yeah.
bad to good. And if I don't know if you saw my post earlier on the Old Guy Facebook page, but this week's song of the week was
Was
Bruno
it Bruno
Mars.
Mars?
Yeah,
Yes,
Bruno
I did see
Mars.
that.
I love Bruno Mars. I love all kinds of music, but 24 Karat Magic is the song for this week. So that's just something we like to do with everybody that comes on.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So I
Um,
guess that'll do it for now. We'll look forward to you coming back on. I'm sure, we see each other every week in the different chats and groups. So, but to actually come back on and talk about how things are going with your deal and stuff like that would be great.
yeah, definitely. And I wanted to add one thing, and I know especially for a lot of like newer investors, one of the big things that helped me to get to this point in terms of getting to the closing table, uh, aside from patience and adaptability, there was a video, and I know this was specifically one that I put in the accountability. It was maybe about a month, maybe a month and a half ago. One of the Wednesday accountability calls that we have was a gentleman named Rian Doris, and basically he's the CEO. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's like the Neuroplasticity Institute or something like that. But basically, the whole point about it was um, he broke down how to go from having these, you know, far off, seemingly unattainable goals, breaking it down all the way down to the things that you need to do, yearly, monthly, quarterly, daily, even hour by hour. And if I can get that link, I can send that or over to you. And then, if you want to post that, I wholeheartedly recommend everybody check that out because it for me, coupled with uh and I believe because he also talks about accountability a little bit, which that's why I was just like, hey, this literally is hitting every single box of not only are there things that are very specific and I don't want to say like minute, but like, things like during some of the accountability calls, one week it'll be something like, hey, talk to three lenders, get information about how they work with investors. And then another week it'll be, get three insurance quotes, talk to, Fidelity or not Fidelity, State Farm, Geico, and even though now again I'm, prior military, so went with USAA, but small things like that, where again the combination of do something that's easily manageable, but then be held accountable to it week in and week out, where those little goals essentially kind of stack up to the point where now I've got a lender, I've got an agent, I've got a property that I've identified, got a insurance. Now I can keep going on and on and on all the way until it really is really the culmination of all of those smaller steps in the process. So it shouldn't be something where it seems like a daunting process, but uh I'll end with this. The best way to end up at the closing table to close on your first property, how do you eat an elephant or a whale? One bite at a time. Take
That's it.
manageable chunks
Yeah.
and just keep going.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's a great point too. If you do find the link, we'll try to put that in the description later. But that brings up a thought. If folks had questions for you and especially about turnkeys because they're not super popular these days, and it looks like you're having good success so far. How can people reach out to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My socials are like literally all over the place. I guess probably the easiest way, Facebook. It's just Chester Williams on Facebook. YouTube. Again, it's the wealth building journey. Like I said, I don't have uh I forget what you call it. You can reach out, and I think you'd be able to get in touch with me there, um, by um, oh my goodness, what are some of the other ones? Instagram. Um, it's actually the Deuce is Loose. It was just an interesting random name that it picked. So I was just like, that sounds cool. I'll go with that. But I may end up changing that later. But right now it's DADEUCEISLOOSE. The Deuce is Loose. And then X. Another random and interesting name and completely has nothing to do with anything else. Charismatic Rob. It was just like those are just as about as all over the place as you can be. So that might be another short-term goal for me to unify or make every the what do you call it? The handles, I guess, for all of the platforms uniform so that people will know, okay, this is the same person across all of the different, social media platforms. So
Yeah, well, I think the wealth building journey says it all. So I vote for that one.
yes, yes, that's definitely going to be um I might actually work on that over the weekend. Um so it'll either be one of the previously mentioned ones or, you know, especially since it's a long weekend, it might all be changed over to the wealth building journey. So I actually
Okay.
have a funny story about actually accidentally working on a holiday once. So I can bring that up for the next time.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we got to save some good stuff. Okay. Well, then, again, we appreciate you. I'm sure quite a few people are going to be reaching out to congratulate you, and it's well deserved. You've done a lot of hard work, and the journey begins, right? You're a landlord now.
Yeah, it goes back to Matt's Matt's course name. I'm a landlord now. But yeah, no, it's definitely this is I think the best part. It's so awesome to be part of a community of like-minded people who are all going in the same direction and we're all cheering each other on. And the environment is just one of just it's encouraging and it's positive and it's really, really great. It's a really great place to be.
Yep, you got it. You said it. Okay. So we'll arrange another time, and we'll look forward to chatting with you then. But we'll see you all over the place this week.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We'll see everybody soon.
Okay. Thank you.
All righty.